Welcome to the Global Pulse, a short video series where our experts break down a trending topic in international business and why it matters to you.
I'll be talking today about a new term that has made its way into the global trade lexicon, friendshoring. But first, a quick review of some other types of shoring. You've probably heard of offshoring and onshoring. Offshoring is the practice of moving some of a company's business operations overseas. The typical reason for this is to take advantage of lower costs. Onshoring is the practice of transferring a business operation that was moved overseas back to the country where it was originally located. The typical argument for onshoring is that supply chains that are flung across the globe are exposed to a variety of risks. And indeed, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit and the outbreaks of the disease in China created the possibility of disruptions, there were increased calls for onshoring. The argument against onshoring is the obvious one. In most cases, it would make goods more expensive for consumers. Of course, the US is itself not immune to shocks to its domestic supply chains, and on account of this, it was suggested that a better way to manage risks of disruption to the supply chain would be through what is called multi-shoring. This involves locating suppliers and service providers in multiple countries so that one country or companies there are not too much reliant on events in one supplier country. These are not just abstract academic arguments. They influence policy as well. And let me provide one concrete example. During the pandemic, a serious semiconductor chip shortage overseas created shortages of a range of goods from laptops to automobiles. With that in mind, and with the goal of making the US more self-reliant when it comes to semiconductors, Congress recently passed the Chips for America Act, which authorized $52 billion in subsidies for semiconductor production. Companies and industry associations have welcomed this, saying it will make the US more attractive for semiconductor manufacturers and reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. So now on to friendshoring. I'm not sure who exactly coined the term, but Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's use of the term lately has attracted a lot of attention for what it might signal about US policy. Friendshoring refers to the avoidance of excessive reliance on, in her words, sourcing critical goods from countries where we have geopolitical concerns. The idea here is that excessive reliance on unfriendly countries limits strategic choices and hampers the ability of the US and its allies to respond to geopolitical crises. What it would do is it would seek to replace trade with unfriendly countries with trade with strategic allies. The war in Ukraine has had a lot to do with the formulation of this policy. The dependence of the European Union on Russian oil and gas placed limits on the ability of the US and its allies to respond effectively to Russia's invasion. US policymakers appear to be worried about dependence on China and what it might mean if a future geopolitical crisis, such as possibly involving Taiwan, were to arise. An area of concern is green energy. China is currently the world leader in green energy and a key supplier of solar panels. It also controls much of the critical raw material used for wind turbines and batteries, and this has caused some consternation in Washington. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm stated it as follows: "We've seen what happens when we rely too much on one entity for our source of fuel, and we don't want that to happen. So to diversify those energy sources and to link up with partners is part of our energy security." In an acknowledgement of the risk that such dependence on China poses and illustrating the principle of friendshoring, the US and Australia recently signed the Australia-United States Net Zero Technology Acceleration Partnership. This agreement signals their resolve to work together towards diversifying the green energy supply chain. We're also seeing sourcing requirements that reflect this philosophy make their way into US law. The Inflation Reduction Act, signed into law recently by President Biden, incentivizes electrical vehicle manufacturers to assemble their cars in North America and provides incentives for reducing dependence on China. It also requires a percentage of the value of battery components to be manufactured or assembled in North America, and a percentage of the value of critical minerals in the battery to be extracted or processed either in the US or a country that is a free trade partner of the US. So while friendshoring may be a new term, it is already being baked into law and official policy. It is important to appreciate, though, that while this policy of relying on strategic partners when it comes to critical goods might serve a strategic purpose, it imposes an economic cost. That said, I fear we will see much more of such policies go into effect in the near future.